So that sure was a lot of information. Hope you found some of it interesting. But now I'm going to get to the part of the video where I actually give you my recommendation of what I think is the best way to enjoy the best audio and video quality from your Nintendo consoles. Let's take a look. We're going to go back to the Famicom and the NES. Okay, Japanese Famicom and North American Nintendo Entertainment System. Since there's a choice of version of console here, the original versus the redesign, I'll tell you which console I think you should use. For the Famicom, use the Famicom AV. Since this only outputs RF, which is poor audio and video signal, especially on a newer TV, I think the redesigned Famicom AV is your system of choice. In regards to the NES versus the NES2, this is a little bit tougher because a lot of people know that the cartridge loading system tends to fail over time. This one is a lot more reliable. However, not only does the NES2 have RF out only, the video signal on the redesign is not nearly as good as the original. So my recommendation is, provided that you have a Nintendo Entertainment System, an original one, that has a cartridge loading system that's still in good condition, you're going to use the original Nintendo Entertainment System. But you still have a choice. How are you going to hook it up? Not with RF. Use the standard audio-video cable hookup on the side here. How are you going to do that? Well, with the Nintendo Entertainment System, the best way to go, and you can use any cable, but like I said, I like to stick with the original Nintendo cables. Use the composite video and mono audio that it came with. However, use some sort of splitter. So at least you can get simulated stereo out of both speakers on your TV. As far as the family computer goes, how are you going to hook this up? I would hook this up with the Nintendo branded composite video stereo AV cable. The nice thing about this one is that even though you're going to get mono sound, it is going to be coming out of both channels. This system does differentiate between the two. I believe Nintendo released a cable that had, I think it looked like this. It had only the yellow for the video and the white for the audio, but still you're going to be having that problem where you have audio coming out of only one channel. You can buy that cable if you want, but if you want simulated stereo, I would go with this one. Something to note, the S-Video cable. If you're hoping to get a little bit sharper of a picture out of the Famicom AV, it's not going to happen. This doesn't output S-Video even though the connector will work. Something else of note to be careful of, and I did this. You don't want to do this. I stick with Nintendo branded cables. I don't like to go with cheap knockoff cables, and it's really easy to do. You can find cables that will work with the Xbox, the PS 1, 2, and 3, and the Nintendo systems all in one for the low price of $4.99 with free shipping. Sounds like a deal that's too good to be true. And you know what they say, things that are too good to be true, most of the time they are. And the reason for that is, if you take a look at this, this is a stereo audio, composite video, and S-Video cable for Nintendo systems that use this connector, which is Super Nintendo through Gamecube. It's not licensed, however, it's some knockoff brand. You'll notice that the build quality is not nearly as good. You take a look at the gauge of the wire, you can see there's a huge difference how thin this wire is versus how thick the Nintendo branded cable is. And I don't know this from first-hand experience, but something I've heard that these cheap companies do is they may have connections for both composite video and S-Video, but to save money, they just run or they splice the composite video signal to the S-Video connector. So you may think you're getting an S-Video signal, but you're really not. You're getting a composite video signal through an S-Video connector, and that's no good. Something else to note. Maybe not with this knockoff cable specifically because it's intended only for Nintendo consoles, but with the ones that have connectors for Xbox and also PlayStation systems, if you use these with the Famicom AV, you run the risk of blowing up some internal components. And by blowing up, I don't mean explosion, but if you use some of these cables that aren't intended for these systems, you cross some lines inside the system, and capacitors, resistors, flux capacitors, whatever it is, they get too hot and they stop working. So thankfully, my friend's an electronic engineer. He took it to his lab and he fixed this. I did it twice, by the way. Whoops. So that's why I always use Nintendo branded cables. I know they're going to work and I know they're high quality. So my last bit of advice, use these on CRT TVs, not flat screen high definition TVs. You can. You're going to get a fairly decent picture quality so long as you use the composite video, the yellow cable, as opposed to the RF on the coax input. But these systems were developed during the time of cathode ray tube TVs, and that's where they look the best, in my opinion. Now, if you don't have a cathode ray or CRT TV, that's understandable. You're going to use it on what you have, which may be a flat screen. But my recommendation for the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Famicom AV, composite video, Nintendo Entertainment System, composite video on a CRT TV. Alright, the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The last of the Nintendo systems where there's actually a choice to be made between models. My recommendations are the original Super Famicom and Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Mainly because you can use the Nintendo branded S-Video cable to get the best picture quality out of it, not using any mods. I understand there are mods you can do to get component video out of these. I've even seen people do HD and even HD on the original NES. But like I said, being kind of a purist, I like to use original Nintendo cables that were available at the time. Both of these systems, the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, are compatible with the S-Video, while the redesigns are not. So my recommendation is Super Famicom, Super Nintendo Entertainment System with a Nintendo branded S-Video cable. If you can get one of these on eBay, I highly recommend it, even though it probably might set you back in the area of $80 or $100. I would recommend playing these systems on a CRT TV. Alright, N64, either the US NTSC or the Japanese NTSC. I recommend using the S-Video cable, Nintendo branded of course, on a CRT TV. Now, as far as my recommendations go for the GameCube, you have a couple of options. And that depends, number one, on what type of TV you have, and number two, on what version of the GameCube you have. We'll get into that in a second. If you have an old cathode ray tube TV, CRT, one of the old glass ones, my recommendation is the Nintendo branded S-Video cable. If you have a flat screen TV with component video in, or YPBPR, I recommend that you use this Nintendo branded cable. Now again, you're probably going to have to import it like the S-Video cable. It may run you in the area of $80 to $100, so I realize that's prohibitive for a lot of people. It would also be prohibitive if you have a newer version of the GameCube. As most of us know, the GameCube was Nintendo's least successful console, and hopefully the Wii U won't become Nintendo's least successful console, but that's a topic for another video. But given that it wasn't selling very well, to cut cost, somewhere mid-production, Nintendo started to remove the digital AV out. So some GameCubes only have the multi-AV out for yellow composite video and stereo audio. And you'll know because this port is missing, and also this panel here is black. It was a universal black color that they used on the spice-colored GameCubes, the indigo, and the jet black GameCubes. So the older ones with this AV port, the color of this panel match the color of the rest of the system. So if your GameCube is one of the newer ones and you don't even have this, well, it's kind of a no-brainer. Hopefully, if you're using an LCD TV, it has S-video. A lot of LCD TVs don't because, well, this video format was really only popular in the mid to late 90s. But if you don't have the component video out, either this or, unfortunately, Nintendo branded composite video, stereo audio is going to be your best bet. But if you have that output on the back and you have an LCD TV, this is the way to go. Alright, Wii and Wii Mini. Well, like I already said, Wii Mini, no way. Not even a choice. You're going to want to use the original Wii. And even though the Wii is not HD, I would recommend using it on a widescreen, flat screen TV. Because, unlike the Gamecube, all Wii games, well, not, I can't say all because I know that Mario Party 8, for example, only runs in 4:3. But I'm sure 90-something% of Wii games run in widescreen, 16:9. And CRT TVs, for the most part, I actually have a 16:9 CRT TV, but those are really heavy, they're really rare, they're hard to find. Most CRT TVs are 4:3. So in order to play games in their original aspect ratio, even though the Wii's not HD, I recommend playing the Wii on an HDTV. In order to get the best picture quality out of that, you're going to want to forego the composite video cable that came with it in favor of the YPBPR component cable that you could buy separately. And that's the best way to get the picture, good picture out of your Wii system on an LCD TV. And finally, the Wii U. Now, even though there's a choice you could make between your video output on the Wii U, you could use HDMI or you could use the YPBPR cables to buy separately. My recommendation, of course, is using HDMI. You're going to get the best resolution, the best picture, and it's Nintendo's first HD system, so you need to play it in HD. I bet you thought I was done. Well, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's switch boxes. Now, what I'm going to say may surprise you, especially if you saw my collection video from 2 years ago, I think it was, so that would have been 2012. I was using probably about 3 or 4 switch boxes. My opinion now on switch boxes is negative. I don't use them. And the reason for that is, every time you introduce a connection, and by the way, a switch box is so that you can plug several consoles into one TV, and you select them simply by pushing the button that they're hooked up to. And the reason I don't like switch boxes anymore is because, especially if it's a cheap one, and it's easy to find cheap ones, it's hard and it's expensive to find quality ones, they add something to the video signal called impedance. And the technical term is impedance, the common term is noise. And even though in a lot of cases it's negligible, you may notice some waviness, some fuzziness, some very light background snow. Because every time you add a connection, you're adding a little bit of impedance to the video signal. And that degrades the video signal. So now I get rid of the switch boxes, and I'm all about having a direct connection from the Nintendo branded cable to the TV through the best output, which in my opinion for the most part is S-video on a CRT TV. But that's a topic for my forthcoming collection video. Talk to you guys later.